Hey boys and girls, we're back again with some more factual education. It's our 6th lesson in Unit 2. This one actually finishes up our chapter on supply and its costs of production. After this we are going to get into some of the trickier stuff when we learn about pricing, but you'll be able to handle that no problem. Let's get started with the learning targets. First learning target is going to be analyze how labor affects production. Second one we're going to get to is differentiate between increasing and diminishing returns. And our third, analyze how production and total costs are calculated. And our fourth one is going to be analyze how to determine your highest amount of profit. We're going to go with 2 for 1 here. It's going to be analyze how labor affects production, and we're going to differentiate between increasing and diminishing returns. When we get into it, increasing productivity. So when we hire one more worker, we are determining what the marginal product will be. And marginal product is one of your vocabulary terms, basically talking about how much more will we produce because we hired one more additional worker. Now, it makes sense, right? Me doing a job by myself, I can be only so productive. I hire a second person to help me, well, then we're going to be more productive as 2 people. Other things that helps too is things like in modern times, we tend to use specialization of labor. That means that one person is trained to do one job that is involved in the production process. And this is going to allow them to be really good at that one thing, and others can be trained to be really good at their part of the production. This allows each worker to make more or be more productive. Some examples of that would have been like back when cars were first being built, you'd have one person basically build a car all by themselves. Then you had Henry Ford come along with the assembly line. And that's what specialization of labor is. That one person does that one thing. Maybe you just sit there and you install windshields all day long. But the guy down the line, he's putting tires on. So that's specialization of labor. You're not going to be the one putting the windows in the car, putting the tires on, building the engine, because that just takes too much training. It just takes too much time. So you get good at what you know, and you can be even more productive. And we're going to talk about some terms here called increasing returns versus diminishing returns. If I hire an additional worker and my marginal product increases, I have what's called increasing returns. And if I hire an additional worker and my marginal product decreases, I have diminishing returns. That means I'm actually making less than I did before. So basically what's happening here is by looking at the chart, you can tell the diminishing returns will set in when I hire a 4th worker, because what ends up happening is my marginal product has gone from 30 to 28. I'm less productive. This kind of goes back to the scenario I talked about in class this week. Of course, if you're watching this later, maybe it's not this week. Where I talk about when you're having, when you're making dinner at the house and a couple people working on dinner, you can be very productive and get it done. Now let's take that similar situation. Let's try Thanksgiving, wherever you're at. It doesn't matter. Grandma's, my family, we host. Could you imagine if every member of the family was sitting inside of the kitchen trying to help make dinner? At some point, you're not as productive anymore. The only thing that actually gets productive is the amount of hostility between family members because they're all getting in each other's way. So let's get into the next one here. Just to go ahead and recap, though, before we do that, increasing returns. If I've got an increase in marginal product after I hire someone, that's increasing returns. The moment I start to have a decrease in marginal product, that's going to be our diminishing returns. Okay, this is going to get us into our 3rd learning target. We're going to analyze how production costs are actually calculated. So, fixed costs versus variable costs. Both your fixed costs and your variable costs have to be accounted for when determining production costs. Fixed costs are just that. They're fixed. Fixed costs never change. If I make 0 products or 1,000,000, my fixed costs are still the same. Examples of fixed costs might be rent or mortgage for a property. Variable costs change, though, with the amount of production. If it cost me $1 to make a fidget spinner, then if I made just the one, my variable cost would be $1. If I made 1,000,000 fidget spinners, my variable cost would be $1 million. Other examples of variable costs, things like the more workers I hire, the more I have to pay in wages. If I pay one person $8 an hour, that's 8, times 8 in a day. 8 times 8 is 64. I think, I'm not going to check. Hopefully I didn't just embarrass myself. But then if I hired a second person, I got to pay 64 times 2. So as you can see, that's basically going to be a variable cost. Other examples too, like the more shipments I make to customers, the more I have to pay in postage. My production costs equal my variable cost plus my fixed costs. That's what a production cost actually is. And some people call it total cost. So production cost and total cost, those are going to be the same thing. This leads us into our fourth and final learning target. Analyze how to determine your highest amount of profit. In the first three entries, I do not have any profit at all. As we start to hire more workers, we can see that our marginal product begins to climb, as well as our profit. The ideal number of workers to hire in this particular case is 6, because if I hire a 7th worker, then my profits actually start to decrease at this point. As far as the diminishing returns, if we want to go back from a learning target earlier, we can start to see those kick in when we hire our 4th worker. At our 5th worker, we drop from a marginal product of 28 to 25. Prior to that, I was experiencing increasing returns. So, again, profit is my total revenue minus my total cost. If you want to talk about how many workers you would hire, we'd hire 6, because at that point we are making the most money. If I hired a 7th, I'm actually making less, making $410. That's a decrease in $70. So, that's going to wrap it up. Let's see if we can hit those learning targets one more time. First one, can you analyze how labor affects production? Can you differentiate between increasing and diminishing returns? Can you analyze how production and total costs are calculated? And can you actually analyze how to determine your highest amount of profit? If you can do all those, we're going to be very successful in our test. The next lesson we're going to go through is going to be pricing. And we'll be okay with that. You'll be just fine. So, see what you can do as far as those learning targets. The ones you can't do, you got to spend some more time on. Maybe watch the video a few times. Maybe stop in for office hours. Don't have too many people who come in. So, we'll see you next time.